Right. I think we can get started with Swiss timing, sharp at 3:30. Ladies and gentlemen, it's true, damn it, move the iPad and not the gavel. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the 4th quarterly preparatory meeting on the Global Refugee Forum Progress Review of 2025 and the launch of the 3rd edition of the Global Compact on Refugees Indicator Report. La traduction est disponible en anglais et en français. Si vous êtes en ligne, veuillez sélectionner votre langue préférée en utilisant le bouton Interprétation sur Zoom. I would now like to briefly introduce the people on the podium and then go over the agenda of this meeting. So on my right, I have Her Excellency Ms. Anna Ivkovits, who's the Deputy Permanent Representative of Switzerland to the UN office here in Geneva. And she and I will be delivering the opening remarks. Then we have Ms. Grace Saniko-Stefan, who's on my left, who's our Senior Statistics and Data Analysis Officer, who will present a short video and an overview of the key findings from the GCR Indicator Report of this year. And then, of course, you know Nicolas Bras, who's the Chief of the Global Compact on Refugees section, who will present the update on pledges and the GRF Progress Review 2025 preparations. And of course, also joining us on the podium is Ms. Anne Kea, who's the Chief of the Governance Service, again, someone who's very well known to all of you, who will brief on the logistical updates on the GRF Progress Review and is also, as always, supporting us as the Secretary for the briefing. We will then open the floor for discussion and interventions. During the discussion, of course, we look forward to hearing your feedback on the report, the program, and the logistics for the GRF Progress Review in December. At the end of the meeting, the GRS Indicator Report will go live on UNHCR's website at 3:30 Geneva time. I'm sure all of you are waiting with bated breath for that to happen, so it will be happening then. I now have the honor to invite Her Excellency Ms. Anna Ivkovits to give her introductory remarks. Over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you very much. Madame la haut-commissaire assistante en charge de la protection, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, chers participants, participantes. À quelques semaines de la réunion sur les progrès du Forum mondial sur les réfugiés, la Suisse se réjouit de participer à cette dernière étape préparatoire en tant qu'État co-hôte aux côtés du HCR. L'objectif est clair. Veiller ensemble à ce que la rencontre de décembre serve pleinement son double rôle, à savoir, premièrement, faire le point sur la mise en œuvre du pacte mondial sur les réfugiés et deuxièmement, renforcer notre action collective. Depuis l'adoption du pacte en 2018, des progrès tangibles ont été accomplis, comme nous le constaterons encore aujourd'hui. Mais les défis n'ont cessé de s'amplifier. Les déplacements forcés demeurent à des niveaux sans précédent, tandis que la contraction du financement humanitaire met sous pression des systèmes déjà sollicités au-delà de leurs capacités. Dans ce contexte, la réunion de décembre ne peut être perçue comme un simple exercice de bilan. Elle doit être une occasion de recentrer nos priorités, de consolider nos valeurs communes et de renforcer encore davantage nos engagements concrets, évaluables et réalistes. En tant que co-hôte, la Suisse appelle l'ensemble des partenaires à s'appuyer sur les enseignements des dernières années pour renforcer leurs engagements, en qualité peut-être plus encore qu'en quantité, en particulier à travers davantage de promesses en soutien direct à celles des pays d'accueil. Nous savons que lorsque les politiques nationales s'ouvrent, lorsque les systèmes d'inclusion progressent et lorsque les partenariats entre humanitaire, développement, climat et paix se renforcent, les résultats apparaissent. Notre ambition est simple. Faire en sorte que la réunion de décembre permette d'accélérer ces dynamiques et qu'elle crée les conditions nécessaires en vue du prochain forum mondial de 2027. Nous souhaitons également souligner l'importance de la participation des réfugiés. Leur engagement au sein du processus n'est plus symbolique. Il est devenu un élément essentiel de la légitimité du pacte. Leur voix, leur expertise et leur expérience incarnent ce que le multilatéralisme peut produire de plus concret et de plus humain. La Suisse s'en réjouit et continuera d'y contribuer activement. Mesdames et messieurs, permettez-moi de saluer les efforts considérables fournis par l'ensemble des acteurs depuis la dernière édition du Forum mondial sur les réfugiés en 2023. L'année écoulée a été marquée par une crise financière d'une ampleur exceptionnelle qui a touché tout le système humanitaire et bien au-delà. Malgré cela, les États, la société civile, les ONG, le secteur privé et de nombreux partenaires restent engagés avec une constance remarquable. Nous tenons à rendre hommage aux équipes du HCR qui ont accompagné ce processus avec une détermination exemplaire, en particulier l'équipe en charge du Pacte mondial sur les réfugiés. Alors même que l'organisation a dû faire face à une réduction de son budget et de ses effectifs d'un tiers. Leur professionnalisme et leur mobilisation ont été essentiels pour garder le cap. Nos remerciements vont également aux États coparrains du Forum de 2023 pour leur engagement continu ainsi qu'aux réfugiés eux-mêmes. Ils sont les premiers touchés par la crise actuelle, mais font preuve d'une résilience et d'une capacité d'initiative extraordinaire. Leur contribution inspire nos efforts et doit continuer de les orienter. Mesdames et messieurs, les prochaines semaines seront déterminantes. Genève sera prête à accueillir une communauté internationale unie autour des principes de protection, de solidarité et de responsabilité partagée qui fondent le pacte mondial. C'est cette communauté internationale engagée et inclusive qui représente l'avenir du multilatéralisme et la Genève internationale que la Suisse souhaite promouvoir. Je vous remercie.
Merci, Excellence. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is, as I said before, a great pleasure to welcome you to this final preparatory meeting for the Global Refugee Forum Progress Review, now only a few weeks away. Allow me also to express my deepest appreciation to all of you for your active engagement in the GCR and the GRF processes. Throughout this year, your participation in the various stock-taking exercises and preparatory meetings has exemplified what a whole-of-society approach truly means. Governments, international organizations, financial institutions, civil society, academia, the private sector, and most importantly, the refugees themselves, working hand in hand towards protection, inclusion, and solutions for refugees and hosts alike. I am honored to launch the third edition of the GCR Indicator Report, which draws on data from 16 indicators, spanning nearly a decade since 2016, to track progress against the 4 core GCR objectives: easing pressure on host countries, enhancing refugee self-reliance, expanding access to third country solutions, and supporting conditions in countries of origin for safe and dignified return. We are launching this report at an exceptionally complex time, one that the UN Secretary General recently described as an age of reckless disruption and relentless human suffering. Resources are shrinking, sovereign debt is rising, political solutions are scarce. At the same time, persecution, conflict, violence, and natural disasters continue to drive people en masse from their homes. And yet, in the face of these challenges, our community has demonstrated its unwavering commitment and ability not only to unite, but to act collectively. This is reflected most clearly in the almost 3,500 pledges made since the GRF in 2019, as well as through various multi-stakeholder pledges. These pledges have translated principles into practice, showing how responsibility sharing can move from aspiration to measurable impact. The pledging framework has proven to be a powerful engine to broaden the base of support and mobilize new partnerships to respond to forced displacement, illustrating the power of the collective. Some may ask whether this resolve will endure. In a moment of escalating global crises, does the world still stand with refugees and the communities that welcome them? And how can we work together more effectively, more equitably, and with greater impact? Well, the GCR indicator reports provides some answers. First, there has been an encouraging level of support to low and middle-income countries until 2023. However, overall funding declined in 2024 and is expected to fall further in 2025. But on a more positive note, local and national partnerships are growing. Second, refugee inclusion in national systems is expanding, with more countries adopting legal and policy reforms that open access to work, education, and essential services for these populations. Third, resettlement reached a record high in 2024 before, unfortunately, declining in 2025, while complementary pathways grew between 2016 and 2023. More returns are being supported in conditions of safety and dignity, although many are also under adverse circumstances. Fourth, data availability under the GCR is improving, with the compact also contributing to the global push for including refugees, displaced and stateless persons in national data and statistical systems to ensure effective and inclusive responses to the increasingly complex challenges of human mobility. Yet, the report also informs us that challenges and gaps remain, and it sounds a clear warning. Progress is fragile. Funding has declined sharply, and available resources, in many cases, often need to be better aligned with actual needs. While responsibility sharing has improved, it remains highly unequal. Support to national actors, especially local organizations, remains extremely limited. Moreover, for nearly half of the world's refugee population, barriers and poverty still stand in the way of self-reliance. Third country solutions still fall short of global needs. Support for returnees remains disproportionately low, despite a sharp rise in returns themselves, while persistent barriers to durable return and reintegration persist, making these efforts harder and less sustainable. Persistent gaps also exist in nationally produced data, especially in areas related to inclusion, and continue to hinder progress and risk deepening due to potential funding cuts. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot afford to lose momentum or leave hosting countries to shoulder the burden alone. With renewed political will, sustained financing, and stronger cooperation, we can continue to make progress towards solutions, leveraging the GCR mechanisms we have built together. The challenges before us may test our resolve, yet they also reveal the true measure of our solidarity and the transformative power of collective action. Finally, as Grace will shortly elaborate, this report not only reflects on where we stand, but also offers a path forward with actionable recommendations. And they will guide us and our collective efforts and inform stakeholders, not only as we approach the GRF Progress Review in December, but also our mobilization towards a third GRF in 2027. So let us translate these findings into concrete action, strengthen our shared commitment, and continue working together to advance the objectives of the Compact. Thank you. I will now pass the floor to Ms. Grace Sanico-Stefan to present the findings of the GCR Indicator Report. Grace, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Assistant High Commissioner. I will now present some of the data findings from the report. Let me start by sharing with you a video teaser on the report narrated by UNHCR's Goodwill Ambassador journalist Atom Aralio. We'll now play the video.
Refugee. You might have heard of that term a lot, but who is a refugee? 75 years ago, the 1951 Refugee Convention provided an internationally recognized definition. Refugee, person forced to flee their own country and seek safety in another. But what does that actually mean? It means being so afraid for your life that you have to run away from home. It means leaving people you love and the community you know behind.
Yenye ilituma tunakimbia Kongo ilikuwa ni juu ya insecurity, balikuwa bametuingilia munyumba, bakaacha naua mama, baba wamemubeba.
Last year, it is estimated that someone was killed by armed conflict every 12 minutes. Simply put, people in danger look for safety. We face a powerful storm. As conflicts continue and funding is cut, resources are being stretched to breaking point. But thanks to the compassion of strangers, many people continue to find safety away from home. The majority, approximately 2/3, in neighboring countries. 10 countries, mostly low and middle income, hosted half of refugees in 2024. People around the world have done remarkable things to help. Governments, businesses, faith-based organizations, and civil society have all pulled together to support refugees. At the 2 global refugee forums, we saw amazing action being taken, with more than 3,000 pledges of support being made, and many have been achieved.
Let us make this Global Refugee Forum a moment of unity, in which all of us join forces to ensure that those who flee because their life, freedom, and security are threatened can find protection.
The difference this action has made is immediate and real. Lives have been saved. But we can't ignore the ongoing heartache. It can be upsetting seeing a child living in precarious conditions. Almost half of refugees are children, yet access to schools remains limited. Only about half can attend regular school.
With education, they are able to change their lives, that of their communities, that of their families.
When funding dries up, it is women and girls who are left most exposed, confronting risks that no one should ever have to face. We need to keep refugees safe and support them to live in dignity, where they can rely on themselves and contribute.
All refugees have talent, they just need the opportunity.
Happily, 3/5 of refugees are allowed to work and move freely within the country they found safety. Refugees are capable, want to be part of the solution, and contribute. And when conflicts end and conditions are right, people should be able to return home.
أول شيء أسلم على جوزي وأخلي البنات يسلمون على أبوهم ياخذون راحتهم.
We're getting better at collecting and using data, and that's helping us make smarter decisions for refugees so that no one is left behind. At its heart, the Global Compact on Refugees is about showing solidarity with refugees and working together to support them. It's about practical solutions that make a real difference. For the full picture, check out UNHCR's Global Compact on Refugees Indicator Report 2025. The data tells the story.
This is the 3rd edition of the report, which builds on the 2 previous versions published in 2021 and 2023. This edition incorporates updated data and refined methodologies, strengthening the evidence base and providing a clearer understanding of key trends without requiring you to reference earlier reports. Where data were available, data spanned the period of 2016 to mid-2025, reflecting progress for over a decade. As the Assistant High Commissioner mentioned, the purpose of the report is to track and support progress towards the 4 objectives of the Compact. It provides measures of disparities among countries hosting refugees and providing durable solutions, allowing the analysis to reflect both existing contributions and the varying capacities and resources available across countries. In this report, we try to make every effort to ensure that the availability and the quality of the data for the 16 GCR indicators, including the use of complementary sources. So for example, we use UNHCR's updated refugee data finder to improve the accuracy and reliability of the data. We also use data shared by partners such as the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, for data on aid and complementary pathways. We had data shared by the UN Human Rights Office for the data on conflict-related deaths, and data on financing shared by the Partnership in Statistics and Development in the 21st Century, or Paris 21, among others. However, data limitations remain. For example, due to insufficient data, one indicator, the indicator on the proportion of returnees with access to documentation, was excluded from this report. Other challenges includes gaps in coverage, limited disaggregated data, and timeliness. Particularly, as the Assistant High Commissioner mentioned, and indicators related to inclusion. But where possible, we also supported it with qualitative analysis to fill some of the gaps. And here, UNHCR colleagues from various divisions, regional bureaus, and country offices really contributed to this report. So in the next slide, I'll show you some of the measures that we have on burden and responsibility sharing. So after 2022, the growth of the total number of refugees slowed down and remained stable, reaching 36.6 million in mid-2025. So all references, unless otherwise mentioned in the report, when we say refugees, this includes refugees, individuals in refugee-like situations, and other people in need of international protections. So there are three factors that lead to this slowdown and instability in the growth of refugee numbers. So first, fewer people were granted refugee status or temporary protection. Second, more individuals returned to their countries. However, as already mentioned, some of these returns occurred under conditions not conducive to sustainable reintegration. And third, resettlement effort increased in 2024, but dropped sharply by mid-2025. So over half of these refugees are hosted by just 10 countries, mostly low and middle income. Also, half of these refugees are women and girls who face heightened risks in displacement, exacerbated further by funding gaps in 2025. So in the next slide, we will also see that progress was made in responsibility sharing. So this is a chart that shows you the cumulative wealth of the countries hosting 80% of the world's refugee population. So that figure more than quadrupled over the past decade, indicating a modest increase in the share of global wealth among countries hosting the majority of refugees. But in the next slide, you will see that disparities remained. It is evident that a small fraction of the global wealth continues to bear the bulk of the responsibility. In 2024, 80% of the world's refugee population was hosted by countries that collectively represented only 27% of the global wealth. And in the next slide, you will see that in 2024, 27% of refugees were hosted in high-income countries, as millions of Ukrainians found refuge in nearby high-income European countries. But despite this rise, high-income countries, which generate nearly 2/3 of the global gross domestic product, GDP, still host a smaller proportion of the world's refugees. In contrast, you will see in this infographic, low-income countries, which account for just 9% of the global population and possess only 0.6% of global wealth, hosted 19% of all refugees. Countries such as Chad, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, South Sudan, Sudan, and Uganda continue to take on larger refugee populations, often with limited resources. Whether measured by their economic capacity or population size, it remains that the world's less wealthy nations that bear the greatest responsibility for hosting refugees. And now we move to Objective 1, easing pressure on host countries. For this objective, we actually use the indicator, the official development assistance, as our measure. Of course, there are other measures of easing burden on the host countries, but our primary indicator is the official of development assistance. So for example, this doesn't include measures such as financing from private sector or finance or South-South cooperation. But at present, data on other development financing remain limited and patchy. So ODA data has been available now for decades, but tracking how much support goes to refugee situation only became possible after the OECD pledged to collect this data during the first Global Refugee Forum. As a result, comparable data are only available now for 4 years, so from 2020 to 2023, as you will see in this chart. With continued refinement of this methodology, we expect to obtain a more comprehensive picture of the support for refugees for the situations over time. But looking at this chart, you would see that the ODA for refugee situations in low and middle income countries amounted to 54.9 USD billion in this 4 years, 2020 to 2023. And humanitarian assistance consistently represented the largest share of that ODA. And in contrast, development-related support relatively remained at similar levels, reflecting challenges in securing predictable long-term financing needed to deliver sustainable solutions, particularly to protracted refugee situations. And in this next slide, you would see that this support is often unevenly distributed. The bulk of the support, USD 31.5 billion or 57% of the total, was directed towards emergency response. So this narrow focus on emergency response leaves other critical areas. So for example, social infrastructure and services, agriculture, energy, industry, banking and financial services, reconstruction and rehabilitation, conflict, peace, and securities. These are sectors that are crucial for refugee self-reliance and host community resilience. They remain relatively underfunded, posing a barrier to achieving the objectives of the compact. And this funding is also declining. According to OECD estimates, the current trends for the total ODA suggests a decrease of around 9% in 2024 and a further drop of 9 to 17% in 2025. And the next slide, please. So now we move to objective 2, enhance refugee self-reliance. So this is data from 48 countries that indicate nearly half, 49% of primary and secondary school age refugees were enrolled in national education systems in 2024. While more countries now have inclusive national policies, many still report low refugee enrollment rates. And in the next slide, we have the next slide. No, sorry, can you go back? So I think I talked about the education. So sorry, so this is what I talked about. And so if we go one slide back, yes. So this is data from June 2025, where you see approximately 62% of refugees. That covers 96 countries. About 33 million refugees had full access in law to the labor market. But if we looked at the de facto access, so 47% hosted in the same 96 countries had unrestricted access to formal employment in practice. So in the next slide, we skip the education. I talked about that. Still on objective 2, actually, we see that refugees still consistently face higher poverty rates than host populations, with significant variations across hosting contexts. Data show that female-headed refugee households are on average poorer than male-headed households, highlighting a persistent gender gap. However, we see that the ability to participate in the local economy is one of the most impactful factors contributing to poverty reduction. So host country laws and policies that restrict access to formal employment or limit mobility to areas with economic opportunities are consistently associated with higher poverty rates. Next, we move to objective 3, expand access to third country solutions. So the year 2024 marked a historic milestone in the global refugee resettlement. More than 116,000 refugees were resettled by UNHCR through the combined efforts of 21 countries, surpassing for the first time the annual target set under the Third Country Solutions for Refugees Roadmap to 2030. But despite the proven value of resettlement, it faces significant challenges, as mentioned already. There is a sharp decline in 2025, with fewer than 25,000 departures recorded by August 2025. Quotas are shrinking, and new restrictions, including limits on gender distribution within families, are emerging. Next, we move to complementary pathways. Between 2016 and 2023, over 1.7 million individuals from Afghanistan, Eritrea, the Islamic Republic of Iran, Iraq, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela received first-time entry permits to OECD countries and Brazil for study, work, family, or named sponsorship reasons. However, just 4 countries issued over half of these first-time entry permits. So those are Canada, Germany, Sweden, and the United States. Next, we move to objective 4, support conditions in countries of origin for return in safety and dignity. The bulk of the ODA went to refugees in hosting countries, with only 3.5% reaching returnees in countries of origin. So funding for refugees increased by 6% in this 4 period from 2020 to 2023, but remained far below the level needed to match the sharp rise in the returnee numbers. And as you will see, millions of returnees in 2024 and 2025. So in 2024, in the 12 months, 1.6 million returnees. And in 2025, just in the first 6 months, already 12 million returnees. The reasons for returning are tied to evolving dynamics in conflict, peace efforts, or changes in the conditions within countries of origins or former countries of asylum. And usually this, for over the decade, most of the returns were to Afghanistan, Burundi, South Sudan, Syria, and Ukraine. And then the next slide. So before I talk about this, I would also like to mention that the report has a section on the Global Refugee Forum Progress Review, including an analysis of the implementation of the multi-stakeholder pledges. But I will skip that in my presentation because you will get a more in-depth presentation later on. And so last finding from the report is on advancing refugee data. Statistical inclusion, or the systematic inclusion of displaced and stateless populations into national data and statistical systems, is making good strides, particularly advanced through the multi-stakeholder pledges. So progress in data availability for GCR indicator is fragile due to the growing impact of funding cuts. And in the next slide, I wanted to just share with you a quote from the High Commissioner that is included in the report, where he is calling for sustaining momentum and reaffirming commitment to the principles of the comeback during the GRF Progress review in December. In this quote, he also says that this is not easy, but we should not be complacent either. So next slide, please. So in the report, we really would like to build on the hard-won progress over the past decade. And so we have identified key areas for action to sustain momentum and to help address remaining gaps. It includes 7 headline policy recommendations and 23 concrete actions, including a call to action to member states and GCR stakeholders during the meeting, progress review meeting in December. I have not included them in my presentation this afternoon, as I think they deserve a more detailed discussion. So instead, during the GRF Progress Review meeting in December, we will have a side event on the report, which will provide us an opportunity to explore further the report's key findings and recommendations in greater depth. It will focus on how to leverage these insights and the power of data to sustain momentum and to safeguard hard-won progress as we look ahead to the Global Refugee Forum in 2027. Thank you very much for your attention. And now I pass it back on to you, Assistant High Commissioner.
Thank you, Grace. This was very informative. And just to remind you that this report will be made available on the UNHCR website after this meeting. I did see some of you taking feverish notes. Don't worry, the report is there and you can read it at your leisure. I would now like to give the floor to Nicolas Brass to present an update on the pledges and on the preparations for the December meeting. Over to you, Nico.
Thank you, Assistant High Commissioner. Excellency, dear colleagues, it's a pleasure to be with you for this last meeting before the big, relatively big event in December. I will try to also do justice to the presentation made by my colleague Grace on the findings of the indicator report by starting with an update on pledge implementation and a presentation on the takeaways from the stock-taking process. Next slide, or actually slides. So first of all, let me start by thanking all of you and colleagues also attending online for the continued engagement and contribution to the reporting process of your pledge, of pledge implementation. We conducted recently, last month, the second biannual outreach campaign, whereby we've been reaching out to all pledging entities asking to update on progress on their pledges. And the momentum, the engagement has remained extremely encouraging and I would say reassuring considering the current circumstances. So over the past 12 months, we have received 1,900 individual updates on pledges, as well as 200 new pledges. And let me reiterate here that pledging doesn't have to happen at a forum or at the Global Refugee Forum Progress Review. It can happen at any given time, and this is something we have noticed over the past 2 years. We're also extremely pleased with the attention given to meaningful refugee participation when it comes to pledge implementation. If we look at the 1,900 updates that we have received, we estimate that over 60% of them have factored refugee engagement, refugee participation in the implementation. What I mean by that is that either refugees have engaged in the development of the pledge, in the planning phase, or in its implementation. Of course, we encourage and we want to see this ratio increase, but it's very encouraging considering where we were coming from. If we look at the cumulative number of pledges since 2019, we have close to 3,500 active pledges that are currently recorded on the database. Of course, that says a very positive story in terms of engagement, but as very often we hear, quality is more important than quantity. And what matters is really the implementation of pledges. Where we remain quite encouraged is if we look at the total number and based on the updates received, over 60% of those pledges, close to 63%, have been fulfilled or are being implemented, which means that 38%, a bit less than that, we have not received any updates over the past 2 years. So this is also something we will want to discuss with you all in December, moving forward to make sure that the pledging system mechanisms really is strengthened and remains also, really serves the community. And in this regard, in December, as many of you have been requesting or have asked, actually have reached out asking questions in terms of whether pledges could be made. Indeed, we said earlier this year that the GRF Progress review is not meant to be another global refugee forum. And indeed, we have not necessarily been chasing all of you individually for new pledges, but it will be a unique opportunity to announce pledges. So I want to really put it on record here that this is indeed an opportunity for announcing new pledges. We actually just sent this afternoon a guidance to, I would assume, to all of you, providing some directions in terms of how to articulate a pledge, make sure that it's actually impactful, that it's achievable, that speaks also to the multi-stakeholder pledge framework. And perhaps more importantly, please take into account the pledges made by host countries, the policy pledges. Try to pre-match the pledge in support of those pledges being made. At the same time, host countries, I know many and partners are also considering and will come forward with new pledges. Please make sure that they speak to those actors out there that are willing to support you. So here I'm talking about costing, I'm talking about implementation plan, I'm talking about also timeline, and really efforts to speak to inclusion in national systems, because we really see the benefits and the dividends of that approach. To make sure that we will take advantage of the GRF Progress Review in December to facilitate those conversations, further matching even, we're kindly asking those of you willing to and considering pledging to let us know by the end of this month, so that we can also do more homework and set the scene ahead of the meeting in December to facilitate those matching considerations, but also prepare the pledging announcements moments that we'll have during the meeting itself, and I will speak to that in a few minutes. Next slide. Now, let me walk you through relatively quickly over the takeaways from the stock-taking process. Many of you will have seen some of this information already. We presented a snapshot 3 months ago at the third preparatory meeting. And my colleague Ziad was here in the room, offered more details during the side event that we organized in the margins of UNHCR's executive committee a little bit more than a month ago. We will issue a report, I think less than 10 pages, that will provide more details and analysis on these findings. And I can confirm that it's fully aligned with the findings of the GCR indicator report. And it will come as a complement to the indicator report in a way that these findings really will take you further to where the response happens, to the field. We'll speak to many of the achievements, the progress, but also the challenges that many of you, pledge implementers, have been facing. We will be releasing the report and make it available when we will be sharing the summary note of today's meeting. But let me just say a few words on what you see on the slide, starting with the financial figure. We looked at the amount of contributions that have been disbursed since the GRF 2023 and that have been reported through the pledging mechanism, through the pledging dashboard. So first of all, this is by no means exhaustive. And we've really opted for a very conservative approach where we only looked at reports received from states as well as foundations. We did not include reports coming from implementers, for instance, NGOs or UN entities, to avoid double counting. Yet we recorded up to $2.6 billion having been disbursed since GRF 2023. So basically it covers the year 2024 up to now. Again, this is extremely conservative, and that does not necessarily align with the ODA data that Grace, my colleague Grace, shared. But we wanted to put that on screen and also include in the report because we've been receiving some questions vis-a-vis the GRF, the pledges, to what extent the mechanism helps mobilizing further resources. And actually, the pledging mechanisms and all the work we are doing, really helps actually track and give a sense as to the amount of contributions that have been mobilized through that system. We hope that we will be able, moving forward, to refine and make it even more granular in the coming years. And we count on, we look forward to discussing this with you in December. I just updated you on the status of pledge implementation, but one thing that is quite striking, and that is really emerging as a finding through that process is the usefulness of the pledging mechanism. And I will put a question to the audience here. Many of you are leading multi-stakeholder pledges, have made individual pledges, are mobilizing partners, are supporting host countries, are including refugees in their national policies and systems. And the question I would have for you is, would we be where we are today without the pledging mechanisms? What we have noticed and something that sort of got confirmed through that process is that the pledging mechanisms has allowed to mobilize, connect partners, rally supporters, and the fact that it's been also based on a lot of goodwill. It's not binding, it's not meant to be political, has actually really allowed stakeholders, states, non-state actors, private sector, refugees themselves, to really come together in good faith. So we hope again that we'll be able to discuss into more details in December, because I am not sure we have actually tapped into the full potential of that mechanism. And we need your support, we need your contribution to actually look at how it can be further strengthened to make it even more fit for purpose. If we look at Objective 2, and I will not repeat what my colleague Grace said, there's been a lot of achievements, advancement in terms of enhancing refugee self-reliance. And here I want to speak about one of the perhaps most, one of the mega pledges, if I may say, on economic inclusion and social protection, which has really gathered many individual pledges. From the information that we have gathered, 500,000 refugees have been, and host communities have been reached through the progress made in terms of through the implementation of those pledges. Something also that is very encouraging and so important, if you remember what was said by our Goodwill Ambassador in the video on education. If we look at the, and apologies, it's written very small, so I will read it. When we look at refugee enrollment in tertiary education, you know that we have this objective of reaching 15% by 2030. From 2023 to 2025, the ratio has gone up from 6% to 9%. We're not there yet, but I think we can say we're on track. When it comes to third country solutions, my colleague, I think, said it all. A lot of progress made, but several risks ahead linked to the challenges that we know all too well. What's really important here is beyond resettlement, looking at complementary pathways. And it's been very encouraging to actually record that 152,000 family reunification permit, have been issued in 2023. The fourth objective of the compact really that speak to supporting conditions in country of origin to facilitate, to support return in safety and dignity. That's perhaps one of the objectives that has proven to be the most challenging in terms of advancing, because it speaks to addressing root causes. It speaks about peace building. We have noticed good practices, and we will talk about them in December in terms of access to housing, land and properties, in terms of access to documentation, including addressing statelessness, for instance, but also looking at how we can really be more human when it comes to building settlements where refugees and host communities live. Next slide, and I'll try to speed up a little bit. That's something we've already discussed earlier in terms of what have been the enablers, what has really contributed to advancing, to making such progress. I mentioned the mechanisms, the toolbox, to quote our High Commissioner, which is the Global Compact on Refugees and the pledges, but that also includes some of the regional mechanisms, including support platforms. We've also, what is evident is the importance of having broadened the base, to quote the compact, There's been an increasing number of diverse partners beyond states, host countries, donor countries, UN entities, NGOs. We have seen cities engaging increasingly, private sector as well, but also first and perhaps foremost, refugees themselves, refugee-led organizations. And that's really encouraging. We're not there yet. Again, that requires certain investment. Now, of course, the challenges, if you manage to read, if you're able to read on the screen, they're actually completely in line with what my colleague Grace explained, so I will not repeat them, but perhaps let me just emphasize some of them, namely the need to go beyond legal and policy reforms, especially when it comes to inclusion. We need to really address the practical barriers to, for instance, when it comes to access to work, when it comes to mobility, and so on. Of course, the financing situation is the #1 challenge. And we will continue calling for reversing and protecting ODA towards refugee situations in low-income countries and middle-income countries. Now, I think we know very well that this may be a call that may not be fully answered in the foreseeable future. So where do we go from there? And the call, the plea that I want to repeat and reiterate is really for all of you, host countries, financial pledging entities, partners, to really to be willing to be part of the solutions, to be protagonists. Because this is a unique moment and we have to really step up. We have to demonstrate leadership collectively. And that's what the GRF Progress Review will be all about as well. Next slide. Now, I will move on the presentation on the program of the event. And it's been a long journey. We're not there yet, and December is not the end of that journey. It's a milestone, an important milestone. And like I just said, we really need your engagement with the right mindset. By that, I mean really wanted to be constructive, wanted to contribute, wanted to be provocative as well, not being afraid of discussing some of the challenges and the pain points. We have been working on a program based on a series of consultations, starting with this group. This is the 4th and last preparatory meeting. We've also held consultations at global level through the multi-stakeholder pledge framework, through regional groups, but also a number of discussions took place at country level, at regional and sub-regional level. And of course, we very much appreciated the stock taking, the consultations organized by yourselves, by also certain stakeholder groups, development partners, civil society, UN entities. These have been very rich, and we did our best to really take into account all the suggestions, the recommendations, and expectations. We've tried very hard to, as we developed and built the program, to maintain a regional balance and also be as diverse as possible in terms of themes and situations. For us, it is also extremely important that we speak to the 4 objectives of the compact and that we are, again, able to have deep dives, in-depth discussions on some of the challenges that we are facing. Next slide. So I will now walk you through the 3 days of the event. The program has been made available online, and I believe it was shared through the link in the email, the reminder of the event that was sent yesterday or the day before yesterday. The modalities of the event will be over 3 days at the CICG. We'll have a plenary discussion, which will be interspersed with a series of spotlight sessions. There will be 4 in total, 1 on day 1, 2 on day 2, and 1 on day 3, which will look at specific thematic priorities. We will also carve out space for pledge announcement, 30 minutes in each plenary session. And we will have a series of side events and strategic dialogues. So this, what you see on the screen is the program to date, reflecting day 1. We will have, of course, an opening ceremony, and we'll be honored to have Councillor Ignacio Cassis with us on that occasion. We will run in parallel of the plenary session a series of side events, which will be on day one focusing on the impacts and benefits of resettlement. We will have another one on advancing gender equality and ending violence against refugee women and girls. And we'll have a strategic dialogue that will look at innovative financing towards refugee situations. So here really it's about having a bit of a more perhaps workshopy discussion, if I may. It would still be a sizable room, but it's a smaller room where we want really to have exchange and brainstorm a little bit, have a discussion in terms of how we can, what instruments, how we can work collectively on really addressing the financial situation we are facing. The first spotlight session will be focusing on employment, refugee employment, and labor mobility. So this is where we connect different dots in terms of solutions, but also protection, looking also at policies, at partnerships. In the afternoon, we will have 2 additional side events. One on the HDP nexus and how we can accelerate it in forced displacement settings. We'll have another one around digital protection in the artificial intelligence era. So this is very much about misinformation, disinformation, hate speech. And in parallel, there will be a strategic dialogue, as announced by my colleague Grace, on the GCR indicator report and the role of data, looking in particular at statistical inclusion. We do acknowledge that we don't expect you today to have digested the full wealth of the indicator report, and that is why we really want to carve out time in December to exchange and also look at the indicator framework altogether. Next slide. On day 2, we will have, of course, the plenary discussion will resume, interspersed with spotlight sessions. There will be 2 during the day. One looking at inclusion in national systems with a specific focus on health and social protection. And the one in the afternoon will be on returns. During the day, we'll have a series of side events. One in the morning looking at complementary pathways. Another one focusing on the role of cities and local governments. And in parallel, we'll have a strategic dialogue on one of the GCR implementation mechanisms, support platforms. And here we're looking forward to having peer-to-peer exchange with those of you which have been part of such mechanisms. We will have another side event in the second part of the morning on the route-based approach in action under the GCR. In the afternoon, we will have, over lunch, over the plenary break, we will have 2 side events and 1 dialogue. The first side event will be on human settlements as foundations for inclusive and resilient futures. So this is also where we look at connectivity aspect, innovative responses. We will have a first geographical regional zoom, if I may, or dive into Latin America and the Caribbean, looking at how the GCR, the Global Compact, is implemented in that region through different mechanisms. And we'll have a dedicated dialogue on the Rohingya response, in particular looking at how the multi-stakeholder pledge has advanced. In the afternoon, we will be honored to welcome one of our Goodwill ambassadors who will be delivering a keynote speech, and who will also be with us at the Nansen Refugee Award ceremony in the evening. The plenary discussion will continue, and in parallel, we'll have 2 side events, one dedicated to meaningful refugee participation, and the other one looking at education and the importance of multi-year financing. This really speaks also to sustainable responses, obviously. We will have our second regional situational dive, if I may say, as part of a dialogue, looking precisely at another dialogue, the Lomé one. That really is an interesting process led by really a state-led, looking at protection and solution strategy in that sub-region. Next slide. Day 3, which will also be the last day, We'll start with, of course, plenary discussion. We'll have two side events. One looking specifically at the Sudan regional situation. The other one will be focusing on legal identity for all. So here we look at statelessness and how we can address it collectively. And we'll have another strategic dialogue looking at the pledging framework, as I just explained earlier on. During the second part of the morning, we'll have a high-level event on Syria, and we'll have side events on localization. During the plenary break, we will have a spotlight session on delivering better, looking at how the Global Compact on Refugees contributes to the UNAIDS and humanitarian reset process. And here we'll be looking specifically at the UN Common Pledge 2.0. And we'll have a side event on strengthening national asylum system and how we can partner for protection. We will have a last side event in the afternoon in parallel of the plenary that will be dedicated to sustainable responses before we regroup all together for the closing session. Next slide. Now, in parallel, there will be what we call an ecosystem. I think I spoke about that in previous meetings. It will not be like, for those of you who participated in the Global Refugee Forum in 2023, manage your expectations. It won't be the same magnitude, the same scale. Of course, there is the resource aspect that has to be taken into account, but also the fact that this is not another Global Refugee Forum. We'll nonetheless have exhibition. We didn't make a call for exhibitions this year because of resource constraints. We will also have speakers' corners that will happen in parallel, and that will give priority to people with lived experience. And we anticipate, we expect that those interventions will complement what will be discussed in plenary and during the different side and parallel events. I want to thank many of you for having very much engaged in submitting concept notes on linked events. Linked events are part of the official programs, but are independently organized. Many, if not the majority, will be off-site of CICG, and they will take place over 2 weeks. So some of them will start actually the week before the GRF Progress review and will continue beyond. We received many submissions. So when I think we've settled to 25 linked events. They will be made available online tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. And I see my colleagues nodding in the back of the room. We will also take advantage of, because we've heard you loud and clear when it comes to making this meeting count, that it's not a missed opportunity in terms of connecting, having deep dives, peer-to-peer exchange. So we will also organize, that will not be part of the official program, but sort of bespoke moments to facilitate this engagement. That also will help you network, because this is really the unique advantage also of having an in-person meeting. Next slide. We will also launch a digital space. We had one in 2021 for the high-level officials meeting. It was very successful. This is basically your space. It's our collective space where it will be a repository of different contributions, written reports, videos, recording messages that will also really help all of you engage further on some of substantive contributions. We have here, you have the QR code and the link for those of you who would like to submit contributions. And this is really addressed for all stakeholders, including non-participants. The event will be broadcast, the plenary session will be broadcast live, but of course, we won't be able to accommodate everyone in person at the CICG. And I think that's the last slide, if I'm not mistaken. No, that is the last slide. You will have links to the different useful resources to you all. You'll have the links to the CICG itself. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with it. You will also, the links include the dedicated web pages where you'll have more details on the event, including on the program. And I invite you to consult it on a regular basis. What I showed you is, as of to date, there may be some adjustment. There may be some events that may move a little bit. We will really limit that because we know that this is very important for you all to also confirm and organize yourselves and compose your delegations. And for any additional questions, I invite you to consult the frequently asked questions. And of course, looking forward to answering those questions, if any, today. Thank you all very much. Back to you, Assistant High Commissioner.
Thank you, Nico. And now I'd like to hand the floor to Ms. Anne Kier, who will provide an update on the all-important logistics relating to the December meeting. Anne, over to you.
Thank you very much, Assistant High Commissioner for Protection. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I am pleased to provide you with a brief overview of logistical arrangements for the Global Refugee Forum Progress Review. I will briefly touch on the following topics: the venue, registration and badging, security, sitting and speaking arrangements, and a few other points. On the venue, as you know, the Global Refugee Forum Progress Review will take place at the Geneva International Conference Center, or the CICG as it is commonly known. The entire building has been reserved for the GRF Progress Review. Thus, there are no other meetings taking place at this venue during that time. The plenary meeting will take place in rooms A, B, C, and D combined. A detailed program, map of the venue, and seating plan will be shared on the event website in due course. On registration and badging, we urge all participants to submit their note verbals with the composition of the delegation at the earliest convenience. This is important in order for the Secretariat to be able to put in place all of the arrangements in a timely manner. Delays will impact our ability to provide you with all of the information that you in turn require. States and intergovernmental organizations are requested to send their note verbals to the governance section, while all other stakeholders are invited to share their letters of accreditation to the meeting with the corresponding stakeholder focal point as appropriate. For registration, we are using the United Nations Indico system. The link was shared by email with all invited guests and will be recirculated with a registration reminder in the coming days. Please note that all participants, including those with a UNOG ID badge, will be required to register in Indico for security reasons. Upon completion of the Indico registration form and once approved by UNHCR, accredited participants will receive their digital badge by email. The digital badge can be downloaded on your mobile device. Participants can also print the digital badge and bring it with them, as the QR code on paper can also be scanned. Please note that your digital badge will be scanned at the entrance of the building. On security arrangements, security at the venue will be provided by the United Nations. Due to the level of participation, there are no special arrangements in place. However, I do wish to inform you that the maximum capacity allowed at the CICG is 2,800 persons. With this in mind, states and other stakeholder groups are kindly asked to limit the numbers of their delegation present in the building at any given time. On seating arrangements in the plenary. As you know, the Global Compact on Refugees, affirmed by the United Nations General Assembly, foresees periodic high-level official meetings between global refugee forums. The Progress Review serves this purpose, bringing together member states and stakeholders to assess progress on pledges and advance the objectives of the Compact. With this in mind, the state sitting section for the Progress Review will be organized in line with the sitting arrangement for the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly. After the co-host and the co-convener states, the first seat will be occupied by the Niger and follow in English alphabetical order. The sitting arrangements in plenary will also be flexible in order to accommodate other stakeholder groups, including representatives of international organizations, UN entities, NGOs, academia, city networks, the private sector, refugees, and organizations led by forcibly displaced and stateless persons, religious leaders, sports organizations, and parliamentary networks. As mentioned earlier, the plenary will take place in rooms A, B, C, and D combined. Room D is located on the second floor. As we get closer to the event, we will share the sitting plan as well as the floor plan of the building and the rooms where each event will take place. Due to the size of the plenary room, seating will be limited. Each co-convener and co-host state will be allocated 4 seats, comprising 2 at the table and 2 in the row directly behind. Other states will be allocated 2 seats per delegation, 1 at the table and 1 behind. Participants representing an organization will have 1 seat per delegation, which will be at the table. This naturally also applies to those attending in their individual capacity. On speaking arrangements for the plenary, there will not be a formal list of speakers for the Global Refugee Forum Progress Review, and protocol will not be strictly adhered to in order to ensure participation from all stakeholder groups. This is in line with the spirit of the Global Compact on Refugees and the precedent established at previous less formal multi-stakeholder meetings. Delegations wishing to make an intervention in plenary will be required to raise their nameplates. While there will be no formal list of speakers, every effort will be made to prioritize interventions by ministers or other high-level senior officials attending from Capitol. Please see the Secretariat desk in the room for any questions. Due to the limited time available in plenary, delegations are kindly encouraged to avoid formal statements and to keep the interventions as focused and succinct as possible, highlighting key developments and gaps in implementation. Please note that delegations will be asked to limit their interventions to 3 minutes. In addition to individual statements, delegations announcing a pledge will be able to do so during the pledging announcements moments as explained by Nicholas. We will not be able to accommodate requests from governments for group statements, no rights of reply due to the limited time available and the nature of the meeting. For the plenary session, interpretation will be provided in all 6 United Nations languages. For other events running throughout the forum, interpretation will be provided in English and French unless otherwise specified. The plenary session will be live streamed on the UN TV webpage in order to reach a wide audience. A limited number of bilateral rooms are available. Please contact the governance section or your stakeholder focal point to reserve a slot. Please note that the Nansen Refugee Award ceremony will take place on the evening of the second day of the Progress Review, which Nicholas has also mentioned, and that is on December 16th. And buses will be made available to take participants to the Bâtiment des Fosses Motrices, where the ceremony is taking place this year. Information related to this event will be circulated to you all shortly. More detailed information on my remarks can be found on the logistical arrangement note that is online. You may also wish to send us any questions that you may have on our email directly, hqgovern@unhcr.org. I thank you for your attention and I hand the floor back to the Assistant High Commissioner for Protection.
Thank you, Anne. I'd like to thank all of my 3 colleagues for their very, very comprehensive and informative presentations. We will now proceed to the discussion session of this briefing, and I would now like to open the floor for interventions. If you would like to speak, please raise your name tag, For online participants, please indicate your name and affiliation in the chat and raise your hand so that we can give you the floor. When it is your turn to speak, please state your name and affiliation. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes to allow for all participants to speak. And we will do our best to accommodate as many interventions as possible within the time allocated. I would now like to give the floor to Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Assistant High Commissioner. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, Excellencies, colleagues. Jordan welcomes this opportunity to contribute to the preparations for the GRF Progress Review and wishes to recognize the sustained efforts of UNHCR and all partners engaged in this process. In the lead up to the Progress Review, Jordan convened a whole of society meeting that brought together more than 100 representatives from government, host and donor countries, UN agencies, civil society, refugees, and the local private sector, academia, and development partners. This gathering reflected the inclusive spirit of the Global Compact on Refugees and reaffirmed that progress is possible only when all stakeholders work together in a spirit of shared responsibility. As co-convener of the 2023 Global Refugee Forum and one of the world's largest refugee hosting countries, Jordan remains committed to advancing this collective agenda. From our recent national consultations, several messages emerged that are directly relevant to today's discussion. First, sustained and inclusive partnerships remain essential. Despite declining global funding and multiple regional crises, support for refugees and hosting communities must remain predictable, long-term, and grounded in equitable responsibility sharing. Host countries cannot maintain stability without such support. Second, evidence-based approaches must guide our collective work. Reliable data, strong monitoring systems, and clear analytical frameworks are critical to measure impact, support social cohesion, and align initiatives with national development priorities. Looking ahead to the GRF Progress Review, Jordan would like to highlight a few expectations. The meeting should focus on implementation and matching, not only on announcing new pledges. New pledges are welcome when they match existing host country commitments or close clearly identified gaps. But credibility will depend on showing that past pledges are being honored, especially in most affected host countries. Finally, Jordan stands ready to continue working closely with UNHCR and all partners to ensure that Progress Review delivers a clear assessment of where we stand, what remains to be done, and how we can collectively translate commitments into concrete, sustainable progress for refugees and host communities. And I thank you.
I'd like to thank the representative of Jordan, and I'd like to now hand the floor to UNICEF.
Thank you very much, Assistant High Commissioner. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, partners, thank you for this opportunity to reflect together on our collective progress. This GRF Progress Review is coming at a critical moment to ask ourselves whether our pledges are translating into real improvements for the lives of refugee children, who, as was said earlier, are disproportionately overrepresented amongst all people forced to flee. Since the GRF in 2023, we have seen encouraging steps towards inclusion, but we have also witnessed the reversal of hard-won gains. Conflict, economic pressures, and severe funding constraints have pushed millions of refugee and host community children into deeper vulnerability. Education systems are struggling to keep pace, child protection systems are overstretched, and social protection coverage remains far too low. Allow me to highlight 4 priorities that UNICEF, together with the partners of the Child Rights Pledge, see as essential as we take stock and prepare for the Progress Review. These priorities were reinforced during last week's biannual Child Rights Pledge event, co-organized with the Permanent Mission of Colombia, and where both Thailand and Brazil shared valuable reflections and progress. First, to reaffirm and deliver on existing child rights commitments, we must move from commitment to measurable progress, expanding access to national systems, increasing school enrollment and learning outcomes, strengthening health and vaccinations, and ensuring that refugee children can benefit from social protection. We must also align pledges across the global frameworks, for example, looking ahead to the 2026 International Migration Review Forum. Second, to defend children's rights in an increasingly difficult environment. Now more than ever, we need leaders who speak out and stand firm when children's rights are under threat. We must reject narratives that stigmatize displaced children and instead promote inclusive systems that strengthen and benefit both host and displaced communities and their children. Third, to invest in meaningful child and youth participation, we should urge all stakeholders to set up and invest in mechanisms that allow displaced children and youth to contribute to dialogue and decision-making. We know that their perspectives make policies smarter, more relevant, and more accountable. And last, fourth, strengthen national child protection systems that include all children. We need to translate pledges into multi-year investments to strengthen laws, services, and the social service workforce, including across borders. This requires harnessing partnerships, joint tools, and innovative financing to maximize results for children. We will reflect on these 4 priorities, highlight the progress achieved together with partners, and identify where more can be done together. And UNICEF remains available to support member states and all stakeholders in the preparation of the meeting to make sure that children are not left behind. This progress review is a moment to reaffirm not just what we pledged, but why, because every child has the right to safety, to learning, to health, and to a life free from poverty and violence. Thank you.
I'd like to thank UNICEF and now give the floor to Dentons on behalf of PILNet online.
Thank you, Assistant High Commissioner, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Latif. I'm the Pro Bono Coordinator at Dentons, an international law firm and one of the founding members of the Global Legal Community Pledge, coordinated by PILNet. Dentons also serves on the core group of NGOs and law firms providing strategic guidance to the pledge, and I was closely involved in the recent stocktaking of its implementation. The rule of law, access to justice, and legal assistance are essential to both robust asylum systems and to the protection of refugees and stateless persons. Yet, due to funding constraints, UNHCR and civil society partners have been compelled to scale back legal aid programs, leaving significant protection gaps. The Global Legal Community Pledge seeks to address these challenges by mobilizing NGOs, law firms, and legal professionals worldwide to extend support where it is most urgently needed. In 2024, pledge signatories collectively contributed more than 393,000 hours of free legal assistance, nearly 50% above their original commitment. Through PILNet's refugee-led matching portal and pitching roundtables co-hosted with Pledge Core Group, NGOs and refugee-led organizations have also been able to access hundreds of thousands of dollars in pro bono legal support from private sector actors such as Dentons. However, our stocktaking also reveals that accessing legal support has become increasingly difficult since the 2023 Global Refugee Forum. Legal needs continue to rise while resources diminish, and lawyers providing assistance to asylum seekers face growing risks of harassment, intimidation, and sanctions. In this context, sustaining access to justice becomes both more challenging and more urgent. At this critical time, the global legal community reaffirms its commitment to advancing refugee rights, justice, and lasting solutions through the law, and would like to share 3 key messages. First, legal assistance and empowerment can be life-saving. Sustained funding for this work must remain a priority within the humanitarian reset. For many, access to a lawyer determines whether they find safety or face return to danger. Second, early access to legal assistance and due process strengthens asylum systems. Such engagement produces fairer and more efficient decision-making, benefiting both applicants and states. And third, safeguarding the rule of law requires that lawyers be free to represent all clients, including those without legal documentation. Governments are encouraged to take steps that expand rather than restrict access to legal support. As delegates prepare for the GRF Progress Review meeting, we call for access to justice and legal empowerment to be a central part of these discussions. Without them, the goals of the GCR will simply not be achieved. Let us work together as governments, civil society, and the legal community to strengthen frameworks that uphold these principles and ensure that displaced and stateless people everywhere have access to essential legal information and assistance to enable them to access rights, justice, and lasting solutions to their displacement. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the representative of PILNET. And now hand the floor again online to the Grassroots Initiative for Strengthening Community Resilience, GISCOR, on behalf of the Advisory Board of Organizations led by forcibly displaced and stateless persons. Over to you, GISCOR.
Your Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Kaumi Wakil. I'm from Borno State, Nigeria, and I serve as Executive Director of Grassroots Initiative for Strengthening Community Resilience, an NGO led by former IDF. Today, I present this statement on behalf of Advisory Board of Organization led by forcibly displaced and stateless persons. We recognize that shaping a truly inclusive and sustainable humanitarian future requires focus on three key areas. One, safe and dignified return. Forcibly displaced people seek not only to return home, but to regain identity, dignity, and belonging. Yet safe, voluntary, and dignified return remains difficult due to the insecurity, destroyed home, and limited basic services. Premature return risks secondary displacement and greater vulnerability. We urge on government, UNHCR, and partners to enable voluntary, informed, and sustainable return by restoring essential services, prioritizing social cohesion and livelihood, and involving displaced persons in shaping their return strategy. But return will not be viable for all, making it vital to strengthen fair and inclusive asylum system and expand complementary pathway and other durable solutions. Moreover, addressing and preventing root causes of displacement through peace building, livelihood support, and disaster risk reduction is more humane and cost-effective than responding afterward. Secondly, meaningful participation and localization. Effective and sustainable humanitarian action requires the meaningful, not diagnostic participation of displaced and stateless people and the organization led by them. Yet, many refugees leaders face barriers such as restrictive level travel document, limited resources, language barrier, and complex procedure, preventing them from participating in the global fora and influencing decisions. We call on the partners to systematically remove this barrier. Meaningful participation and localization also mean recognize refugees, IDPs, and stateless-led organizations as service providers, crisis responders, and equal partners. This requires consistent service provider. This requires consistent funding, technical support, and the real decision-making power throughout planning and implementation, enable them to shape policy, service delivery, and monitoring. To advance effective sustainable response and fulfill the UN 2030 agenda and grant bargain, we urge all the stakeholders to support the multi-stakeholder pledge on meaningful refugee participation and localization. Thirdly, addressing data fragmentation. Finally, we must fix the underlying problem of data fragmentation and parallel reporting, which slow decision-making and the marginalized local actor. We urge the championing of inclusive, interoperable data ecosystem and unified reporting framework to ensure transparency, accountability, and equitable evidence-based decision-making worldwide. In conclusion, the Advisory Board expressed deep appreciation for the tireless effort of field team, local partners, and the host community. As we prepare for Global Refugee Forum Progress Review meeting, we reaffirmed our shared responsibility to transformative. The people we serve are not passive recipients of aid. They are partners in rebuilding their lives and the communities. Our role is to ensure their voice are central to all humanitarian planning and action. Thank you, and over.
I'd like to, beg your pardon, I'd like to thank the representative of GISCOR, and I would now like to hand the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom online.
Fantastic. Thank you, friends, excellencies, Assistant High Commissioner. And a thank you especially to our friends in UNHCR for all their hard work on the indicator report, which we look forward to reading in full, for putting the progress review meeting together, and for all of your efforts to reflect the concerns and priorities of all participants involved. I won't go through the event itinerary in detail, but it's clear from what we've heard today that the final plan has balanced these concerns very well. Now, as others have noted, the GRF Progress Review meeting will be an important stock-taking exercise, allowing us to evaluate and learn lessons from our work to date. But more than that, it's crucial that it serves as an opportunity to, one, reaffirm our commitment to the Global Compact on Refugees, and two, to refine and recalibrate the international approach to forced displacement to meet the challenging global context. Now, to this end, we're particularly interested in the proposed sessions on refugee finance, refugee inclusion, UN80, and the humanitarian reset. And we hope that these serve as a springboard to inspire discussions into 2026 and ahead of the Global Refugee Forum in 2027, and which will enable us to work towards more efficient, more cohesive, and longer-term solutions to displacement. Now, we also welcome the proposed events on women and girls, statelessness, and meaningful refugee participation. These are all elements of particular interest to the UK, and areas where we've been making significant progress in the implementation of our GRF pledges. And finally, speaking of meaningful refugee participation, we're pleased to be funding over 100 refugee participants to attend the GRF Progress Review meeting, and we're delighted to announce that an experienced refugee delegate will be joining the UK's delegation. Thank you again, and myself and my colleagues look forward to seeing as many of you as possible in December for the PRM.
I'd like to thank the representative of the United Kingdom. That concludes the list of speakers. And I would beg your indulgence to perhaps respond to some of the comments and questions raised, particularly the comments prior to concluding this meeting. To the representative of Jordan, we do appreciate very much the role played by Jordan, not just in the GRF processes, but really as one of the most significant refugee hosting countries for several decades now. We appreciate the compassion and the hospitality demonstrated by the Jordanians. And we would also like to reassure you that your recommendations and your comments, particularly concerning inclusive and sustained partnerships, systematic, sustainable, and predictable refugee assistance to refugee programs, and the importance of analytical data are certainly also priorities for UNHCR and certainly for all of the stakeholders present here. And again, also to underline the importance of, as you have said, implementation and matching in relation to the pledges, and not just, the commitment to new pledges during the progress review meeting as well. So we certainly take your words very much to heart, and we do want to underline that. To the representative of UNICEF, I'm very grateful for the fact that they underlined or highlighted really the situation of refugee children. As she said, the refugee children are a disproportionately high number of the global refugee population, along with women. And we also thank her for highlighting some of the challenges in relation to child protection and some of the recommendations that she has made, including reaffirming existing child right commitments, aligning pledges across different international fora, and she also made specific reference to the International Forum on Migration that will take place in May next year in New York. Also the importance of defending child rights in a very, very difficult and complicated environment currently. The importance of meaningful child participation and strengthening national child protection systems. Again, these are all priorities for UNHCR, and I'm sure priorities for all of you represented in this meeting today as well. To Denton's representing PILNET, thank you very much for highlighting the importance of access to justice, the rule of law, and legal assistance. This is critically important, as we know, as you have highlighted yourself. It is very much a life-saving activity in many instances and can represent very much the single barrier to in preventing refugees from being refueled arbitrarily. And the fact that, of course, the funding crisis has impacted very much on the role played by legal firms and legal partners in terms of providing legal support. We are thankful all the more in light of these financial constraints that the global legal community has come together to respect the commitments and pledges that they had made, and the fact that they have even exceeded legal assistance by over 50% beyond the original commitments made. We are deeply grateful for the efforts made by the legal community in terms of both empowering the refugees and also providing them with that critical legal support. We know better than anyone just how important and critical that activity is for the refugees worldwide. Also, to GSCORE, speaking on behalf of the Advisory Board for Displaced Persons and Stateless Persons, we take very much to heart your recommendations concerning solutions, both in relation to voluntary, safe and dignified and sustainable return, and also the importance of resettlement and complementary pathways. We also take very much your comments to heart concerning meaningful participation of refugees and other displaced persons, not just in international fora, but also as participants in their own solutions and in relation to their own situations. So refugees as service providers, as he underlined, and not just as recipients of aid. We also take very much to heart the issue of data fragmentation. We have several of our colleagues working in the data field here, data management field here in this room, and who really do demonstrate the importance of data on a daily basis in terms of our refugee work. And again, also the need for data interoperability. This is not just, of course, an issue for UNHCR, but an issue that is being looked at by the UN system as a whole, and certainly by the humanitarian community as a whole as well. And finally, to the representative of the United Kingdom, thank you very much for highlighting the importance of the December meeting in terms of both refining and recalibrating also efforts to address all of the humanitarian situations that prevail around the world today. Thanks for highlighting some of the specific side events that are of particular interest to you, and certainly some of the UN reform processes, UN80 and the humanitarian reset, that will also be factored into the deliberations during the progress review meeting in December. And again, thank you very much for highlighting the importance, as other speakers have done, the importance of women and girls. And of course, we are deeply grateful to you for the financial assistance provided by the United Kingdom to facilitate the participation of over 100 refugees in this meeting. And I would also like to include in that really the contributions made by Switzerland in that regard as well. I think we are deeply grateful to both countries for facilitating a significant number of refugee participants at the December meeting, and really highlighting the importance of the presence of refugees or from all walks of life in deliberations that affect them or impact them directly. So thank you very much for that. With that, I think we would now conclude this meeting. Thank you very much to all of you for your participation. And we, of course, look forward to seeing you both in all of the events surrounding the Progress Review meeting and certainly at the meeting itself. Thank you very much.